In the unforgiving heart of the painted desert, the silence is usually a sign of peace. But today, the silence is a death sentence. 50 feet down a narrow, sun-scorched crevice, a mother dog named Bella is pinned beneath a shifted boulder. She's trapped in a stone vise, her strength fading as the desert heat begins to cook the very air she breathes. She can't move. She can't escape. And she's running out of time. Chapter 1: The Stone Trap. The painted desert is a masterpiece of geological violence, a labyrinth of ancient red stone and sun-bleached canyons that stretch toward an unforgiving horizon. In the summer months, the silence here isn't peaceful, it is a heavy, predatory stillness that signals the absence of water and the presence of heat. It is a world of vertical drops and hidden fissures, where one wrong step can turn a predator into a prisoner. Bella, a resilient German shepherd mix with eyes the color of amber, had been navigating this maze for days. She was a mother first and a survivor second, leading her only puppy, Pip, toward a hidden spring she had smelled on the wind. She moved with a cautious grace, her ears constantly scanning for the rattle of a snake or the shadow of a hawk. She was the anchor of their small, two-member pack. But the desert is a shifting puzzle of sandstone and silt. As they crossed a narrow ridge overlooking a dry wash, the ground beneath Bella's hind legs simply vanished. A shelf of sedimentary rock, weakened by years of erosion, fractured under her weight. In a heartbeat, the world tilted. Bella slid backward into a narrow, vertical crevice, her body disappearing into a dark slit in the earth. The fall ended with a sickening, metallic thud. A massive sandstone slab, weighing hundreds of pounds, had shifted with the landslide, wedging itself into the fissure. It acted like a natural vice, pinning Bella's hindquarters against the cold granite wall of the crevice. She was trapped 40 feet down, her body held fast by the weight of 1,000 years of stone. Bella didn't panic immediately, she was a creature of action. She tried to scramble upward, her front claws frantically scraping against the smooth walls of the canyon, but the boulder didn't budge. Every movement sent a fresh wave of agony through her lower body, and the realization began to set in: she was in a stone tomb. She was a prisoner of the mountain, and the mountain had no mercy. Above her, the sky was reduced to a taunting, razor-thin sliver of blue. The heat began to pool in the crevice, the sun turning the sandstone walls into a slow-cooking oven. Bella could smell the dust and the dry sage, but she couldn't reach it. She let out a low, guttural whine, not a cry for herself, but a call for the one thing she had left to lose. Pip, only 12 weeks old and barely bigger than a desert hare, stood at the edge of the crack. He let out a high-pitched yip, his tiny tail tucked between his legs as he peered into the dark. He could see his mother's eyes reflecting the dim light below, and he could hear the frantic rhythm of her breathing. He began to scratch at the rim, sending small pebbles cascading down onto her head. The puppy was terrified. He had never been more than a few inches from his mother's side since the day he was born. To Pip, Bella was the world, she was food, warmth, and safety. Now, the world had been swallowed by the ground. He paced the edge of the fissure, his tiny body trembling as the first shadows of the afternoon began to stretch across the red sand. Chapter 2: The Messenger's Dilemma. For an hour, Pip refused to leave. He sat at the very edge of the crevice, his ears pitched forward, listening to his mother's whimpers. Instinct told him to stay, to guard the entrance to the den, to wait for the alpha to find her own way out. He began to howl, a thin, mournful sound that was immediately swallowed by the vast, echoing walls of the canyon. Down in the dark, Bella knew the truth. She was a nurse dog by nature, and she could feel her own strength flagging. The pressure on her hips was cutting off her circulation, and the dehydration was already beginning to cloud her mind. She knew that if Pip stayed there, waiting for a miracle that wasn't coming, the desert would claim him too. The vultures were already circling. Bella looked up at the tiny shadow of her son. She gathered the last of her strength and let out a sharp, authoritative huff, the command she used when it was time to move, when danger was near. It was a rejection. She was telling him to go, to leave her behind in the stone. It was the hardest command a mother dog could ever give, but it was the only one that could save his life. Pip hesitated. He whined and took a few steps away, then ran back to the edge, scratching at the dirt. He didn't want to be alone in the vast, predatory silence. But Bella tuffed again, louder this time, her voice echoing with a ferocity that startled the puppy. She was forcing him into the world, pushing him away from her side so that he might have a chance to return with help. The dilemma for the puppy was a war between two instincts, the instinct to remain and the instinct to obey. He looked at the horizon, where the heat haze made the distant mountains look like ghosts. He didn't know where he was going and he didn't know what he was looking for. He only knew that the alpha had given an order, and the order was to run. Pip turned his back on the crevice. He took one last look at the sliver of blue sky above his mother, and then he began to trot across the scorching sand. He was a 12-week-old shepherd mix in a world designed to kill things his size. The hikers struggled to keep up. The terrain that Pip had crossed in his desperation was a nightmare of loose shale and hidden drops. They saw the blood trails on the rocks where the puppy's pads had given out, and they saw the clumps of fur left on the cactus thorns. They realized the sheer scale of the miracle they were witnessing. A 12-week-old puppy had crossed a gauntlet that would have broken a grown man. As they neared the ridge where Bella had fallen, Pip's behavior changed. He stopped running and began to whine, a low, frantic sound. He reached the edge of the crevice and began to dig at the dirt with his raw paws, his tail wagging with a violent, hopeful intensity. He stood over the abyss and barked, a clear, triumphant sound that echoed through the stone. Down in the dark, Bella heard him. She had been drifting, the cold of the stone walls finally slowing her heart to a crawl. But the sound of Pip's voice acted like a shot of adrenaline. She let out a weak, muffled woof, a response that the hikers heard through the cracks in the rock. "There! Someone's down there!" Sarah shouted, her flashlight cutting through the gloom of the fissure. Chapter 5: The Return to the Crevice. The hikers reached the edge and shone their lights down. They saw Bella's amber eyes reflecting the light, 40 feet below. They saw the massive sandstone slab that held her pinned, a stone vice that threatened to crush her if it shifted even an inch. It was a technical rescue nightmare, a deep space extraction in a location where no machinery could reach. Mark was an experienced climber, but even he felt a surge of vertigo. "The rock is unstable," he whispered. "If we pull her the wrong way, the whole ledge collapses." They had to be surgical. Using their climbing ropes, they rigged a pulley system anchored to a nearby juniper tree. They lowered Mark into the dark, his boots scraping against the walls as Pip watched from the rim, his head tilting with every move. Inside the crevice, the air was thick with the smell of dust and ancient stone. Mark reached the bottom and looked at Bella. She didn't growl, she didn't snap. She looked at him with a quiet, dignified trust that made his hands shake. He could see the swelling in her hindquarters and the way the rock was biting into her fur. She was minutes away from total system failure. "Easy, girl. We've got you," Mark whispered. He used a portable hydraulic jack from his emergency kit, a tool he usually used for clearing trail debris. He wedged it into the gap between the slab and the canyon wall, the metal groaning as it took the weight of the sandstone. Slowly, agonizingly, the pressure began to lift. The stone sighed as it moved back 2 inches, just enough. Mark slipped a heavy-duty rescue harness under Bella's chest. "On 3. Pull," he shouted to the group above. The rope went taut, the juniper tree creaking under the strain. Bella let out a sharp yelp of pain as her injured legs were pulled free from the stone, but she didn't fight the rope. She allowed herself to be hoisted into the air, a broken queen being returned to her throne. Pip was waiting at the rim. As Bella's head cleared the top of the crevice, the puppy went into a frenzy of joy. He didn't wait for her to be safely on the ground, he lunge-licked her ears as she was still swinging in the harness. He was a blurred mess of wagging tail and happy whines, a small hero welcoming back the world he had fought so hard to save. They laid Bella on a thermal blanket, her legs sprawled out, her breathing ragged. She was alive, but she was a wreck of dehydration and trauma. Sarah began to drip water into the corner of her mouth, while Mark checked her for internal injuries. Bella didn't look at the water, and she didn't look at the hikers. She looked at Pip. The puppy crawled under her chin, tucking his tiny body against her neck. He began to lick the dust from her eyes, a reverse of the care she had given him since birth. The mother had saved the pup from the gutter months ago, and tonight, the pup had saved the mother from the mountain. The desert had tried to separate them, but the bond of the pack had proven to be stronger than the stone. Chapter 6: The Savior of the Desert. The journey back to the trailhead was a slow, torchlit procession. The hikers carried Bella on a makeshift litter made of branches and climbing rope, while Pip trotted alongside, his nose never leaving his mother's side. He was exhausted, his legs shaking with every step, but he refused to be carried. He had earned the right to walk the trail as a guardian. The news of the Painted Desert rescue spread quickly through the local community. Bella was taken to a veterinary hospital where she underwent surgery to repair the nerve damage in her hips. The doctors said her survival was a miracle, but they knew the real miracle was the 12-week-old puppy who had navigated 5 miles of predatory wilderness to find the only people who could help. Pip became a local legend, but he didn't care for the fame. He spent his days at the hospital, sleeping in a crate next to Bella's recovery pen. He wouldn't eat unless she ate, he wouldn't sleep unless he could hear her breathing. He had grown up in those 5 miles across the sand, his puppyhood traded for a bravery that most humans never have to find. Bella eventually recovered, though she walked with a slight limp, a permanent mark of her time in the stone. They were both adopted by Sarah and Mark, moving from the harsh uncertainty of the desert to a home with soft beds and a fenced-in yard. But even in the safety of their new life, the two of them remained inseparable, a pack of two that had stared down the end of the world together. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Bella will let out a low whine in her sleep, her legs twitching as if she's still trapped in the crevice. Pip will immediately wake up and crawl over to her, resting his head on her shoulder until her breathing slows. He is still her messenger, still her protector, the tiny sentinel who moved a mountain with nothing but his heart. The story of Pip and Bella is a reminder that bravery doesn't have a size. It's a lesson for anyone who feels too small to make a difference, or too weak to change the outcome. It tells us that love is the ultimate GPS, and that loyalty is a force of nature that can cut through the hardest stone and cross the hottest sand. The Painted Desert still sits in the sun, a vast and beautiful tomb for those who aren't prepared. But the hikers who walk the trail near the petroglyph still talk about the night a brown puppy staggered out of the shadows. They look at the canyons and the fissures, and they remember that even in the most silent places, there are heroes who are waiting to be heard. As the sun sets over the red rocks tonight, think of the Pips in your own life, the small ones who would walk through fire for you. We tell these stories so that the world remembers the debt we owe to the creatures who love us without limit. Because in the end, it's not the height of the canyon that matters, but the length a pup will go to bring his mother home. The desert is vast, but a puppy's heart is bigger. If Pip's journey touched your soul, help us honor the smallest hero of the canyon. Smash that like button to salute Pip and every rescue dog that refused to give up. Subscribe to Paws that saved lives, where we bring you the most thrilling and dramatic cinematic legends of nature's heroes.